Lo único que voy a decir en castellano, este panel va a ser en inglés. Cities are not born smart. They are made smart. They have to be turned into smart cities. And that demands a lot of leadership and a lot of coordination and, as Mr. Palmisano said, collaboration between people that have different purposes. Of course, they have different egos and they have different agendas. So I would like to ask first about that, about what's the role of leadership? What is the role of moving, motivating people to change inertia in cities?
In cities? Or, well, yes. I mean, it's hard for me to comment what it means to be an elected official, Claudio. So, I don't know that I can get through that process, especially with my golf handicap index at 9.2. But I think that there are a lot of analogies to driving change in a large institution, whether it's public or private. And let me say why, give you why I think that before I pass it on to my colleagues who are more on the public side of the equation. I mean, to think that my company, IBM, is homogeneous in thought would be somewhat misleading. We're in 170 countries, 405,000 people, 210,000 engineers and scientists. I don't know how many thousands of PhDs and MBAs. And they all feel that they're in charge every day. And we have today about probably, depending upon how you measure it, 500,000 to 600,000 shareholders who also feel they have the right, and they do, they're the owners, to tell you what to do every day. So it's not exactly a harmonious environment. Now there are some leverage we have that you don't have in public life, needless to say, because there's a thing called economic incentive that you can drive some cultural transformation with economic incentive, behavioral kinds of things, bonuses, etc., what have you. I do think, though, that when I draw the analogy, it's a diverse population, a global footprint, and all these different thoughts, different opinions on how we should be doing things, it starts with the same point of view. You need to have and I'll use the term point of view, not a vision, because in our world, a vision, it doesn't have the substance of detail that these engineers and scientists and mathematicians would value. They value substance, engineering, detail, analytics, thought, right? They don't value big ideas. I mean, it works better on television than it does in my world, right? Because my stuff is very boring internally. Your stuff has to be very exciting to capture the imagination of people. So through that, you have to give them a very, very strong point of view of what change is going to occur and why you need to be prepared for the future. Because if you're not prepared for the future, you are only going to erode or decay. Now, in the business context, that's called profitability, earnings, et cetera, morale, spirit, what have you. I think it's also true for societies. If you do not move to the future, build a smarter city or take society to future opportunities, whether it's citizen development, education, health systems, whatever crime, as we heard from Fernando, whatever it happens to be, if you don't move to the future, you will only decline. And so you have to be able to convince people. So the most important thing, as I think about it, in the business context, is you have to get 405,000 people in 170 different countries with different cultures, backgrounds, religious beliefs, etc., to buy into this future. Once they get excited about the future, at least in IBM, they're so smart it takes care of itself. I do have the advantage that they're extremely smart. So I don't have to tell them what to do. If I did, they would probably go crazy. So, you'd have another reaction to telling them what to do. But you sort of have to encourage them, and then they'll take care of everything else. So in that way, I'm blessed. I mean, I am blessed having all these really, really smart people that once they get excited about it intellectually, will go make it happen and go execute. And then I go off and do other things.
And in your case, Claudio, you came about as a mayor in an adversarial competition where you have different points of view, different ideologies of people. How do you motivate people to change Peñalolén into a smart city if it's not yet a smart city?
Well, let me, before answering the question, Fernando, just thank IBM for the invitation, but especially Sam, because as we were recalling at the beginning of the meeting, last year I attended the New York conference of IBM, and Sam spoke a very similar speech, and he was talking about worldwide assessment for cities that were willing to become smart. So as a very humble but proud Chilean, I approached him saying, are you really meaning what you're saying? Because, Peñalolén would like to be in that, program. He said, of course. And at that time, I didn't realize that he was speaking with the truth, but he was. And last Friday, we got the assessment of the Smart City Assessment for Peñalolén, and we compare ourselves with Copenhagen, Helsinki, Singapore, Boston, San Francisco. So for us, it was a very good experience. And from that perspective, seeing Peñalolén being compared, a small city within Santiago, metropolitan Santiago, being compared to world-class cities. I'm going directly to your question, Fernando. I think leading a city has a lot of requirements, but first of all, I would say the humbleness to be willing to learn from others. Very often, mayors, and I have a couple of colleagues here, we think we can reinvent the wheel every time we are elected or re-elected. And if we were just willing to spend some time seeing and learning from others within Chile and elsewhere, I think we will have a lot of leapfrogging in terms of learning of how to manage very difficult and complex problems. The second thing is we need to understand that cities, you mentioned, is a system of systems. And in that, the public sector is only one of the players. It's not the only player for that in that arena. So the importance of understanding the other players. We have talked about here business, and I think it's very important. We have talked about universities, which I think are very important, but in the case of Chile, and I see some people from universities here, probably are not as involved as they should in the planning and in the discussion how cities get along. And third is citizens, and we haven't talked about citizens now. Citizens are very empowered now, and they want to be part of the decisions of their neighborhood, of their comuna, of their city. So trying to tackle the challenge of putting in the same table business, universities, public sector, and citizens, and have a common view of what you want for your city is a huge task. It's not a technological task. It's a leadership task. And of course, as people people that believe that the common good is not the mere sum of individual interests, but a common vision, that requires a lot of leadership to, in a way, encourage and force people to think not only about their own personal interest, but the common good interest. And believe me, that is something very difficult to do. I was seeing one of the slides that Fernando mentioned there from the magazine said, the NIMBYs, not in my backyard. That is the way people think. I want development for my city. I want garbage collection. I want, but I don't want it in my backyard. I don't want it in my city. I don't want it in my comuna. So building a common vision requires not only the willingness to learn from each other, the possibility to bring each one on the table, but also negotiating different interests. And that's politics. So thinking that this is only a matter of studies and technological approaches, and leaving aside politics of trying to understand and to bargain different interests in the city, will lead you to a lot of mistakes and fraud plans. So I just would say that I believe that cities can become smart, but in order for that to be true, you need not only the key actors on the table and the key leadership, but also the willingness to work one with each other.
Let me ask the question to Fernando Echeverria, centered not on success, but on the opposite, on failure. If we could make smart cities just by decision, just by thinking about it, never failing, well, every city would be a smart city, and we wouldn't have any transportation problem. But sometimes we implement policies that fail, that don't work when we want them to work, that they take time. People feel obfuscated about it. What is your thinking about the process of turning a city into a smart city, dealing with mistakes at the same time?
Well, first of all, I have tried to motivate my people to work for the city. I have tried to show them the importance of our job for the quality of life of the people that live in the city. We have to remember that in Santiago we have 750,000 people living under the line of poverty. And public actions make a real difference in the quality of life. Sometimes you can have a failure, as you say, Fernando, but if you don't act as Sam told and you stay still, you will decline, and probably is the worst failure of all. I think you have to invent new solutions. Sometimes they will be successful, but when they are successful, they have a lot of impact in the quality of life of people. I saw in the breakfast in the morning the mayor of La Florida in the morning here. I was in last weekend in a program we are doing with them to change 70% of the lighting system of this borough. They will obtain a 30% of efficiency in the consumer of electricity, and they will have 50% of more lighting. We had a meeting with a group of people over there, how the quality of life of them will be incremented with this. First of all, with the more lighting, they will have a safer city, they will have a safer environment, and also with the efficiency they are obtaining with the new system, they will have some savings that can be invested in other things. So I think it's better to have a failure than not to intend it.
I would like to ask Mr. Palmisano, on the same vein, IBM happened to go through very rough times in the last decade. And there were a lot of covers saying, IBM is a dinosaur,
Yes,
extinct. Well, you're still, kicking and kicking good. So,
kicking the best we've ever kicked.
really. So how do you turn the situation for the better?
I think, if I go, I don't want to bore you with the IBM story, but I'd like to draw a correlation to kind of Smarter City in the sense of the trend. I mean, we will be 100 years old next year, which for a tech company is not only rare, I think it's the only one. So there aren't a lot of benchmarks of a tech company that's lasted this year. But you would say, if you reflect on why did IBM get in trouble? IBM got in trouble because we were so comfortable with the past, we didn't move aggressively enough to the future. And I could go through the technology, but that's not necessary. It makes the same point for this conference. Because you can be very comfortable in the past. You can have good profits and good customer relationships and all the things you would measure as important. But then when things move, you need to be able to move to the future. And I think that's what we're talking about today. I mean, you could be, I'll use an industry which no one here would react to because I don't want to draw the correlation to this kind of a commodity like copper or silver. But suppose you drew oil as a correlation. And you have a $150 barrel of oil and you're running a petrochemical company, it's a pretty easy job. But then when it goes to $50 a barrel and your cost structure was refined for $80 a barrel, you have a very hard job because you assumed that life would only be at $150 a barrel, but you were conservative and you picked 80. So what did I just say? You had an inflation point that wasn't sustainable. In technology, if you don't move to the future, you have a company position that's not sustainable. And that's when we got in trouble. And we've now moved to the future. And, we have record everything, earnings, cash, share price, what have you, because we're moving to the future. Now, as I say that, when I get back to the conference, it's easy to move to the future when you have a crisis.